podcast by Inner Plant, and this is the second part of our series, let's call it, about diamonds versus wine and ag inputs and how all that works together. So as you remember from last week, we had Dan Northrup and Ariel Payton from the Inner Plant team starting to talk about this topic, and then. As we alluded, we made this episode so much better because now we have Dave Hula here today, who's not just a farmer, he's basically the farmer. Dave, you've got quite the following, and a lot of the people that listen to this podcast are big fans of yours, including Dan. So maybe just start with an introduction, and then if you can give a brief introduction, and anyone that wants to hear a longer one can listen to episode 1.
I'm Dave Hula. I farm with my brother and a son, part of Renwood Farms. We're located on the north banks of the James River and in Virginia. So we're 60 miles from the Atlantic Ocean, fine sandy loam soils. We farm some of the oldest ground that's been cultivated here in the United States. When Captain John Smith landed on Jamestown Island in 1607, they started farming what's called mainland farms in 1609, and we cultivate that ground. So it is the oldest continuously farmed ground from the Western civilization. And, it's the second place we recorded over 300 bushel dryland corn. And there's housing developments all around it. There's a bike trail that goes right through the middle of the farm. So we deal with the urban sector side as well. But we grow corn, we grow soybeans, we grow small grain. Most of it's no-till. We try to stay current with technologies. We push yields, obviously, and I'm one of the co-founders of Total Acre, a group across the country that we work with growers, Randy Dowdy and myself, and then we have a support team. So with that, a lot of growers probably know us from the high yield corn. We've had success with that, and I don't really like talking about that because that could jinx me for this year because we're always trying to do better, Miss Shelley.
Let me ask you something. So you have your plot that you farm for like high yields, and then you also have a commercial
Yeah,
side of the operation. And how
sure. Well, we tend about 4,000 give or take. It kind of changes. Solar panels, housing developments, and we pick up some ground. The neat thing is everybody thinks we have a magic piece of dirt. We farm in 3 different counties. The highest yields have come from where we've irrigated because we've been talking about dry land. Some growers here in the country this year, particularly in Nebraska, have been dry. But irrigated is where we get our highest yields because we can control that. But we have 5 pivots that have harvested over 500 bushel corn. We have 2 pivots that we've seen over 600 bushel corn. And our APH on those corn fields, we don't manage the whole pivot intensively because it's a lot of risk involved. But our APHs on some pivots are 437 bushels. Some of them are in the 360s. So it depends on the size of the pivot and how we've managed it. But several years ago, we had half of a 160 acre pivot average over 500. That's exciting. I mean, we see the high yields, that's cool. But when you can see that on this whole half of a pivot,
Right.
and so it's not a magic piece of dirt. It is a system that we've created and the details. I don't chase a golf ball. I walk cornfields. So that's my passion.
And maybe the people that are walking through the field are like whispering to the corn, maybe.
Oh, yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Okay, then do a quick intro as well.
Yeah, this is great. How do you follow the King of Corn? Like I said, I love the show that you run too, Dave. It's a real pleasure to be here. And the 2 hats that I'm kind of talking from here. One is working as an analyst for an investment group that's trying to bring in new ag technologies. I'm also a researcher at Iowa State. We study nitrogen responses in corn, and in both cases, I guess with the trouble, and then maybe a frustration of bringing new products to the farm, especially new classes, thinking about biologics, things where there isn't a lot of history yet, trying to bring these things in. And so that was kind of the notion of what wine versus diamonds. And what I was thinking about in that contrast is a product that somebody knows really well when they buy it. In the case of a diamond, because you get this quality grade and it's scored by several different people. And by contrast, with a bottle of wine that changes every year and you kind of buy it on a story, And then when thinking about ag inputs and where we are, you've got a whole new class where we just don't know anything yet, and they have some nuanced effects. And then you got old inputs like nitrogen, where we have really good ideas. And so that was the question: like, how do you move? It's not really one or the other. It's just ones you know about and ones you don't know about. And I feel like that's what Total Acres aimed at. Maybe I'm wrong, but it's like, how do you get really good? And in farming, I think you call it ROI, knowing
Yeah.
that it's not going to be the same every year. Irrigation, to your point, you can smooth a lot of that out. But in dry land, some years is wet, some years are dry. So those are the questions where, like, you talk about testing versus ROI farming, and you guys almost set them up separately. But to my mind,
Yeah.
testing is figuring out ROI.
Sure. Well, yeah, y'all, when I was reading the stuff from Mr. Shane about the wine versus diamonds, I'm thinking beer versus cubic zirconians. That's more my speed. So, the idea about new products and testing stuff, this is nothing new. Farmers, my granddad was an innovator. He tried new stuff. But nowadays, because 2025 is such a tight economy, we got low prices for input. I mean, excuse me, back up. We got low grain prices, and a lot of inputs have gone up. Now, some inputs are cheaper, but equipment's gone up, seeds clearly gone up, certain crop protection products have gone up. So growers have to understand which ones are making them money. And Mr. Dan, you talk ROI. Total acre growers, when they join, one of the things that we ask them is, like, at the end of 3 years, because it's kind of like a 3-year commitment, because, first of all, they think, well, a guy in Virginia and Georgia, they don't farm in the Midwest, so they don't farm, so they're not going to help me out. Well, there are certain things that we call must-dos that help growers, and we know that they're proven. Well, the first year grower, he's going to try a little bit, see some success. He tries some more, sees more successes, and then by year 3, he's kind of engaged. And what we have found that farmers have a tendency to have a relationship with somebody, whether it's their seed provider, their nutrient provider, crop protection co-op. They have a relationship and they depend on them. I don't want to say too much, but if that relationship is strong enough, they'll convince the grower to try something, and then they try it on a lot of acres, but they never leave a control strip. Farmers will never give up something they know pays. And especially, whether we get into biologicals, you mentioned fertilizer. How many farmers are going to quit putting out nitrogen, Mr. Dan?
You know what? We talked to one guy. It's funny, depending on the field, some years you make a lot of money on it, some years you don't make very much. I think that's what's so amazing about it. When we put, particularly in the Midwest, fields with long histories of manures are a lot less nitrogen responsive than you'd think.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I do agree. It takes so many pounds to make a bushel of corn. The universities, Iowa State, y'all got great charts that, hey, it takes so many pounds of these nutrients to make a bushel. Now, you may not physically be applying it. And I'm excited for my son for what he's going to see in agriculture, because we're going to be applying stuff, but it might not be the NP and K. We're going to figure out how to unlock some of these nutrients. We're already seeing some of that with some of these nitrogen replacing products and phosphorus enhancing products. And then growers are using manure, and they might be chelating it with some humic acids or something like that to allow it more efficiency. So growers as a whole, they want to adopt things that they have confidence are going to pay. Now, how do we figure that out? Well, Total Acre, we have growers. We have companies first come to our group because we offer testing, and we match a grower with a particular company. The company provides their expectations or protocols. Then the grower will implement those tissue samples every week, monitoring rainfall, soil samples on 1 acre grids, give them yield maps, give them as applied maps. Then all that data gets put into our YMS software program. And then other growers can just log in, see what's working and what isn't working. If a product is new to somebody, let's say there's this biological product or this fertilizer enhancing product. What I like to tell growers when a distributor brings it by or comes by, I want to know, how can I measure the success of this product outside of yield? Because yield comes from certain areas. So how is it going to work? And how can I measure that? And if they can't give me that answer, then that's a product I'm probably not interested in trying.
So what's a good answer to that question in your mind?
Well, a good answer to that would be, all right, we can identify air product provides more nutrients, so tissue levels are going to be higher. We can physically measure the mass, or do we have a bigger root system? Do we have a bigger stalk? Do we have more leaf area index? Those things, they can be measured with and without. And then other areas is, for example, corn. Corn is yield is determined in three ways. Mostly it's about the number of kernels per ear, and then the weight of the kernels or the weight of the ear. Now, there's ears can have more kernels based on rows around or kernel length. So these are areas in which growers can go out and just physically look at their crop to say, hey, yeah, this is doing something, or it's not. We're just going to wait for the combine. Most growers say, hey, I don't care. If it's going to give me more bushels, I'm going to have more bushels to sell. I'm going to make more money. Well, let's say you get a hurricane, you get a hail event, you get a derecho, and now you've missed that harvesting ability. So where else can you measure it? Well, I'm a tissue sample guy. I'm a soil sample guy, and I like to look at plants. So that's how we do it through total acre, is we understand where yield is captured and where yield is lost.
That's great. We're having actually a little bit of a fight with another grower that some years you can't measure yield. And with it going up and down, I guess, thinking through your results of yield contest winner in 23 being much higher than the number in 24.
Yeah.
But hopefully you learn just as much, even though there's a major yield difference between what happened in those seasons.
Sure. I mean, of course, we all want to, people say, hey, what's your yield goal? My yield goal is to have the best crop that I can have in this year. Every year is different. Last year, we had a great start. We just got heat, unbearable heat at the wrong time during grain fill. Hot nighttime temperatures, as you well know, Mr. Dan, the crop is just maturing too fast. We couldn't get the weight. We were still picking 62-pound corn, but it just matured too fast. And then we had a lot of smaller kernels. So every year is different, even though you do the same thing. If you have a program and you match it on GDU, say, hey, we're going to make this application at 375 GDUs. So you do that, but, sunlight, if I could ever come up with a product that I wish somebody could make, would be sunlight in a jug. If I could figure that out, we wouldn't be worried about this podcast. We'd be doing something way more fun. So,
like artificial light at night?
Just something to mimic, because the crop, when we get cloudy days, usually that sometimes means you're getting rainfall. I'm big into Brix testing. And, we understand, how the sugars are. When you get premier sunlight, now you're getting much higher Brix levels, and we're doing more of the biology because they're flushing in at nighttime. When we get the cloudy days, we don't see our Brix levels go as high, and we're not creating the photosynthesis that the crop needs. And for an example, when a grower is trying to determine what type of population to plant his corn crop, and, we do this VRT stuff. On your best ground, you want to plant it thicker. On your poor ground, you plant it thinner. We don't do that here at Renwood Farms. We pick 2 or 3 different populations, and we strip the field, because I'm a risk manager. If we have a premier sunny year and where we have rain, let's say we're controlling moisture with irrigation, my higher populations are always going to win. If we have a cloudy year, my lower populations are going to outperform the higher populations. My best spots of the field, they're always going to be my best spots of the field, irregardless of whether it's a high or low population. It's a function of sunlight. And most growers are, because we're ROI driven and we got to make money, they're trying to figure out what's best for their operation. And some growers want to do the prescriptions. And I shared with grower Mickey Gotch when we did the TV show in Nebraska. I said, hey, Mickey, when you do your prescriptions, but on some strips, let's add 10 or 15% yield. I mean, more populations. And on some strips, let's reduce it 10 or 15%. That particular year where he reduced it, that was his best corn. It was a cloudy year in Nebraska, and whoever expects cloudy year in Nebraska? I mean, they always get sunshine, and it's irrigated. But his lowest population was his best corn. So sunlight in a jug. That's
Yeah,
what I'm.
no,
And
I
I
get
see
it.
your
So-
wheels turning. Like, how can we do that?
No, I always joked in the beginning, like if we can control weather, then that's what we do. But the next best thing is inner plant, you know. But one day we can control weather. So I'm trying, okay, trying to figure out how to connect all the dots. So you clearly, Dave, are pretty much Dan's dream farmer, right? Like you're managing your operation to the T, like you know what's going on, you're tracking, you're putting in the effort. Um, there's this whole question about what works, what doesn't work, and let's take weather out of the equation. I guess what I'm trying to understand is it just that the companies are coming in with products that are advertised not correctly? Is it just bluntly like not true? Is it that it was true in controlled environments, but it's not true in the field? Or I guess where I'm at this point of my journey, because I'm not as much of an agronomist as you guys, is it probably works in some places, in some conditions, sometimes, right? Like you can't control everything in the field. And then what does that mean about the learnings? And what does it mean for a farmer even from this year to next year and the next year? If you have clouds, what are you going to do? And so that's the question, Dave. Like,
Yeah. Well, when you're wanting to, let's focus on biological products. And
although if we
to
can talk about fungicides, I'd be curious your thoughts because that's
okay,
what of my
fungicides.
days. But yeah.
Okay, fungicides, for example, in total acre, we would throughout this at the end of the season in December, we have December meetings and we go around the room and we ask growers, what did you like? What did you not like? And what would you not, if you were going to, as you continue to farm, what would you not give up?
Okay.
What was painful is we could be doing that, and one grower would say,
Yeah.
I will always put a fungicide at tassel time. Then the next grower says, I will not do it because it wasted my time and money. And that annoyed me because, like, why? They're in the same area. How
Right.
come
So
one's
who's right?
working and not working? Well, we sign NDAs, so I got some things that I can't share. But yet it came down to the carrier of the fungicide. So let's think about, all right, if we're making a fungicide application and one has one type of water source and another one has another type of water source, and they're not having similar results, it comes down to the application if they were doing it at the right time. So
Right.
what is it driving to? Is it because they got chlorine in the water? Is it because it's hard water? Is it because the pH is not right? Understand what the products are saying, talk to the manufacturers. And I was out in Germany. BASF sent Randy Dowdy and myself to Germany just as COVID was starting to happen. So I was ready to get home, Mr. Shane and Dan. It's like, oh Lord, we got to get home. But we were talking with them about fungicides and products and how come some work and some don't. We asked them what their carrier is, and a lot of times they're using distilled water as a carrier when they're tested. What farmer uses distilled water? None.
The water matters that much.
Sure it does. Think about even nutrition. You like to have maybe look at whatever nutrient you're applying and think about the leaf. It's going to pick up, it likes a lower pH. So, what are those targets at? And that is what pains me when a product works on one operation and it doesn't work on the other, and they're doing it the same way, except, whether it's, when the product is applied, how it's applied. I'm a guy that I want my first load when the airplane's flying. I want the first load of the day. That's that's the best load that farmer is going to get because the crop is got the dew still on it. It's waking up in the morning. It's soaking up. Those stomates are still open. It's soaking up whatever you're applying. In the heat of the day, she's pretty much shut down. Mr. Dan, when does corn shut down? Usually around 86, 88 degrees. It's not doing anything.
I don't know
When
if
we're
you know
putting
the
on
answer. No, I'm curious.
when we're putting on fungicides later in the year, it's hotter than that usually when the airplanes are flying. So I know what my applicator likes to drink, and so I try to make sure he's happy. So
So how do you
Mr.
test if there's
I
so
was going to
many
say, yeah, in
variables?
that context, Mr. David, when you hear two guys say that it works different, what do you, and you've said this too, 10% population. Why is 10% the right number, not 20% or 5%? And what's that
yeah.
increment where you start to feel like you're really observing something?
Well, I
And
realize
yield,
if I
yield being one number, but tissue testing maybe being
yeah,
a lot more sensitive. How do you think
well,
about what can you see and what's really real versus the noise of the field?
Well, when I think about changing populations, a lot of growers say, hey, I drop population 1,000, 2,000. You're not going to see that. That's going to get washed up. We like to say 4,000. Now we're at a real number that you can visually see a difference in the stand, and then you can also notice that there's going to be a yield difference. If it was hard enough to get him to do that. So if I were to say, hey, let's change it 20%, he's like, no way. So that gave us, that put us in that 3,000 to 4,000 plant change.
Yeah.
Tissue level, yes. If managing, I can talk populations. Managing a 26,000 population stand, managing a 32,000, it's not a whole lot of difference. But when you get into 40,000 and then you go to 48,000 or over that, now we're crowding the plants. They're fighting amongst themselves. There's only so many roots out there. Was it Fred Belo says that based on per acre, no matter how thick you plant your crop, I think he's the one that shares this, you're only going to have so much root mass. I'm not going to argue that that's true or not, but there's a lot of competition out there.
Yeah.
So when we get into much higher, denser plants, it's a different management scheme. Now we got into this reduced stature corn. They say you can plant it up to 50,000. We're playing with
Right.
some of that this year.
Sure.
We'll see. I don't know because this is new. This is the first year we're seeing it outside of just little impact or small trials. And having a measurable difference outside of yield is what growers don't oftentimes look for. They look for yield.
Yeah.
Certain growers that are going to be the early adopters and innovators, they're the ones that are measuring it outside of yield. So when you think of when growers think about, hey, is it going to yield me more or not? That might not be the first audience that people are looking for. That's the audience that once the product's been proven, that's an audience that, are going to more adopt to it. But the early adopters, innovators, they're not just looking for yield. They're looking for how can one measure that?
Mr. David, I guess, you talk about corn so much. I'm assuming you also grow soybeans, maybe some small greens too. I'd be curious, Interplant does more work with soybeans today. Same type of lessons in soy, just, same ratios and so on. Like, what's different between corn and soy other than what it looks like?
Well, the price, soybeans usually 2-3 times a bushel more, but you get less.
Yeah, I was going to say yields are usually 2 or 3 times lower. So it kind of washes out, doesn't it?
But yeah, we are big small grain. There's not as many acres of small grain in Virginia anymore because of cover crops, but we're big into small grain production. Small grain's nothing but baby corn. It's a grass. I consider it like 3/4 of what corn would be. So we manage it. Ratios are very similar. Applications, we're soft red winter wheat. So we plant in October, harvest, we'll be harvested in the middle of June to 1st of July. Long growing season, but growth stages, they're similar in how it influences yield. We're still trying to get more berries or more grain per head. How can we do that? There are tricks to do that in small grain. And soybean, yeah, we're big into soybean production as well. We're in the seed side of it. So where growers are planting earlier and earlier to get more yield, we can't plant early because I'm still in Hurricane Alley. We got high humidity and heat and temperatures in August and first part of in September. So as beans are trying to start to mature and we got this heat and then we got all this rain, we can get poor seed quality. So we plant later. Actually, we haven't started. We have not planted a bean yet for seed production. And it's mostly because we're wet. We would be starting now, but we'll try to finish up by the 4th of July. We'll go from a 3.9 to a 6.1. So we got a lot of maturity range in their environment. But beans, ratios might be a little different on beans, but the basics are still there. We need they create their own nitrogen. We need phosphorus. We need potash. We need zinc, sulfur, those. But the products that help pollination are the same. Hey, we need boron. We need moly. And how many people
Do
put
you
out
add
boron?
nitrogen to your beans?
What was that, Michelle?
Do you add nitrogen to the beans?
Oh, we put ammonium sulfate out early just to give it some more salt or give it sulfur early. And then if we have beans that are going to be in that 90 plus bushel range, we will supplement some additional nitrogen there. But you think about all their corn success, we have not ever had a field average 100 bushel of soybeans. We've had 100 plus bushel spots, but we haven't had a field average 100. That's one of my son's projects.
Really?
We've had some struggles in the last couple of years, slugs and weather.
What have you gotten on the competition soybeans though? Like over 200, right?
We've never done that, but there are people that have. Alex Harrell down in Georgia, who by the way is a Total Acre member. So some of the things that we like to think he's learned came from Total Acre, and he shares what he learns with their Total Acre group as well. So it's a learning process.
And so one of the things that the questions that came up about actually, Dan, maybe you can share the question, but I do want us to touch on it. The comment around all the advertisements and all the products sound identical.
Well, I think that is, Mr. David, like who gets in the door? You see lots of brochures, so do I. Everything adds 3 to 10 bushels, and
better than the competition.
Mr. Randy made a funny comment on the last episode that that it all has an 80% win rate.
Yeah.
And I liked I thought this is a wonderful answer. Like, how's your product work? And if someone says it works, then maybe they don't get in the door versus something a lot more mechanistic. But again, from the research side and to this point of you can't measure 2,000 population different, it's very difficult to measure even a 10% difference in nitrogen rates too, depending on the field. So anyway, I think that's the question again. Who gets in the door, I think is
and
what you're excited about.
For me, who gets in the door, it's not because they're going to give us product. Randy Dowdy says I get everything free. I wish that were the case. I mean, I got a John Deere bill. I just paid a big nutrient bill. So we get big bills as well. It's all relative though. But what gets in the door first to me, it's about relationships. So not just somebody new dropping in. It's like, is my nutrient guy talking about it? Is there somebody else that I have a relationship with says, hey, you really need to look at this. Now, if it's a new product or new technologies, then if it makes good walking sense, a grower should try it. And one thing that separates me from a lot of other growers is outside of me failing more. If it made good walking sense and it didn't work year number 1, I'm going to try it again. Because maybe there was like we talked about yields last year. We've had well over 500. Last year we barely broke 500. So if I'd have just tried stuff based off last year, that would have been a different result than what we had 2 years ago. So relationships, does it make good walking sense? And then free products, some people get excited about that just to try it, say, oh, I got this. And then they talk about guarantees. I don't get excited about a guarantee because usually there's enough loopholes in there that it's hard to get that guarantee money back. Because it's like, well, you got to do this many acres, you got to leave a control strip like this. And so that becomes cumbersome. And then we get to arguing over, well, did I qualify for the guarantee? But I think growers, something flashy sometimes gets them in there, but relationships, I think, are the key. Then having trial data. And, y'all talk, I mean, Miss Shelley, you talked about third-party trial data, farmer data. Clearly farmers like to see other farmers' results. What worked for these growers. But then third-party data, that's not the 80% of the wins. A third-party data from like a group, there's a lot of groups out there that do third-party data. Their total acre members survive off total acre data because they know that, that's
Do you mean
unsolicited.
extensions or something else?
Like cooperative extensions. Yeah, there are some universities do a much better job than others, clearly, because there's funding. We like to see we have in Virginia, these farmer trials where an extension groups will get with growers and then do these trials in a larger scale. The small scale stuff, that's important to get products registered and all, but that's not going to do what Mr. Dan and I are looking for. We want to see it on a bigger scale because there are going to be spots of the field that are not going to perform. And then there are going to be spots that are going to overperform. I tried a product last year and new product. It made good walking sense. Put it on 3 different tracts of ground. One was a 7 bushel reduction. One was a 6 bushel reduction. And the third one was a 27 bushel increase. How can you make a decision off that? Well, we understand that it's something, say, hey, we're going to try it again. So we got it this year. We'll see. We pull tissue. So, outside the tissue samples again. But having some kind of data that growers can work with. Then if you partner with people like Missy and Ken Bauer, influencers, I think they too have a ability to help get products into farmers. I don't say in the hands, but farmers have a tendency to listen to other farmers, and influencers. I think that's an overused term sometimes, but they are impacting agriculture. There are some influencers that are impacting ag, and I disagree with them not 100%, but there were times it's like, what are you saying? That's like you said, 80% of the wins, Mr. Dan. Some of these influencers, 80% of the time that product wins. And I'm like, there is no way, y'all. So I don't know what they're getting to make that 80% comment, but got to be careful with some influencers.
Yeah, Mr. Dave, I just had a quick question. I've been in ag for about 10 years, but you hear to this point that the information channels have changed a lot. And I'd say I'm in Missouri, some of the guys here will say, it's like God Family Extension in that order of who you listen to. And I don't know that a lot of extension has that third status now. Yeah. It might be you put YouTube in the middle, you put podcasts in. I'm just curious, you, others, yield management, or is it going to be God Family and then Total Acre? Maybe that's the mission of the company. I don't know. Like, how is that changing? Where do people talk to farmers? Podcasts, YouTube, Twitter.
Yeah,
where it is starting to happen.
Well,
shouldn't they listen in those places? To your point.
Yeah. Well, I know when I was first starting farming full time, there were extension meetings we went to. There were conferences we went to. A lot of those have stopped because there's no funding for them. People aren't participating. The Commodity Classic has been great. Yeah. They've been able to keep that audience there. And is it because of the shiny paint? Is it because of the information that's provided? or is it, a chance to get away from cold weather, go somewhere warm? And then relationships, people are going, but Mr. Dan, information is coming faster. How many people pick up this right here to try to find out, oh, I got a problem. What do I need to do? And, I'm not a social media guy, as y'all well know, but I know that there's a lot of information. There's these, what do they call them? Professionals that are on keyboard professionals. And, they think they know it all. And unfortunately, they probably are giving out some bad information. Like I mentioned, some of the influencers probably are. It's hard. I don't know how one could quantify who's a good influencer and who's a bad one, other than joining Total Acre. We filter it all out for you. And but podcasts like this, I haven't seen one, haven't been, this is the first time I've been part of it. Now I'm going to go watch it, see what y'all got going, offering too. So
Yeah, Dave, come on, there's like 40 or 50 or 60 episodes.
yeah, I got to catch up.
You
That's
gotta
right.
catch up. Next drive somewhere.
I
You
got a
not
question,
drive a lot
David.
in Virginia? What's going on? It's not.
Yeah. Yeah.
As an article I haven't written yet, I guess it's a question is, and maybe this one will be like, is corn yields more like the high jump or a stock car? Let me tell you what the analogy is. The high jump changes by a lot every time a new technology gets developed, 10, 15%. Stock cars, you tune them like crazy, and the fastest one is just the one that happens to be tuned the best that week, and they do keep getting faster. I guess, and you've read out there, you think 800-900 bushel corn is possible. Is that going to be paradigm shifts, or is that, tweaking the stock car more and more, combination of both? Like, how do you get there?
Sure. Yeah. I was talking with a good friend of mine in Michigan, I think just this morning, about something very similar, Mr. Dan. What happened in 96? A big yields jumped. And why was that? Because Roundup technology came on board. Now, was that because the genetic gain was there, or is that because their management changed? Because now everybody could grow a corn crop or a soybean crop because they could control weeds. So I feel that there was two. There was a genetic gain and the management change. Growers, when I go talk to any audience, one of my first presentations or slides is there's no such thing as a silver bullet. Everybody, and I mean everybody, wants to know, what is that one thing I can put in my spray inductor and give me all these extra bushels? And that's where I said, if we could have sunlight in a jug, that would be that one thing. Growers have to understand it's a system. So gains are going to happen slowly, but then we can see these big yield bumps. Each individual growers can, because they have a plateau. There's, oftentimes I'll say your ceiling tile is here. And once you punch through that ceiling tile, you can gain a lot of bushels. An example of that would be, we were stuck at a yield barrier in the 340s to 360s. A good place to be stuck at, but I'm a guy that wants to go past it.
What happened?
A friend of mine, Philip Davis, who now owns Genesis Ag, said, "Hey, Dave, at V3, let's get our plants micronutrient balanced. Let's not worry about NPK. It's kind of like your kids, you give them candy and sugar, they're going to go crazy. You give them vegetables, they're going to be more sound structurally." So we did that. We put on a micronutrient package at V3, and we gained 27 bushels just by that one difference. We had a ceiling tile. We punched through it. Well, now we're at 380 something, and now we got a new ceiling tile. We got to figure out how to get through that.
Yeah.
And that's what growers, once they figure that, and these are those that, when you talk about the race car versus, just the big gains, the race car is tweaking. So we're going to continue to tweak, but then all of a sudden we're going to have this little ha moment, and then we're going to jump up, and then we're going to tweak again. And it's aggravating because, farmers are investing in equipment. Talking to a grower, he's like, "Hey, I'm spending more money. I bought Easy Drops. Now I got Easy Drops. I'm putting nitrogen close to the road. Do I need to buffer my nitrogen salt index so I don't hurt the roots?" Like, yeah, you got to add some humic acid. Do Black Label zinc or something. And he's like, are we doing that for humic acid? Or are we doing that for more zinc? Like, well, it's a combination of both, but yet you're going to see a benefit. Well, he's tweaking his system. He's spending more money. And now hopefully he gets a bigger yield. The jury's out, who knows?
This was a great question and a great answer to wrap up. I've been trying to bring in my message, and this is exactly that, which is everyone's been so focused on genetics and increasing yield potential, but we know the genetics already have so much yield potential we're leaving out there, right? And that's been kind of the thought process for us throughout, which is if we can make field stress management easier, we can increase yield so much more, right? And then, Dave, you're basically the plant doctor. So you're coming in, you're like, this thing here, this thing there. And but at some point, you can actually teach people at scale all of that information, right? The world's getting smaller and practices are going to get, transferred. So that's great. And thank you so much for joining today. I do think having a farmer on the podcast makes it better. So thank you, Dave. And Dan, thank you for joining us again.
Yep. Look forward to it. Thank you.